Morning everyone, I'm so glad you could make it and join us today for our lesson. So today we're going to be going over simple tense. Okay, I decided to break up tense into 3 days because you get different types. So you get past, present and future tense, but there are different types of past, present and future tense. So I thought I'd break it up into 3 so we can do 1 per day so that it doesn't get too complicated and you don't mush them all up. Okay, so today we're going to be going over simple tense. This is one of the main ones that we use every day. Between simple tense and continuous tense, it's the one used most often by people. So first, before we start going into the actual tense, let's just recap a bit about verbs because verbs are very, very important when you're doing tense. So first things first, what is a verb? A verb is a doing word. It shows us what action is actually happening. Jumping, running, skipping, talking, these are all verbs. They show what action is taking place. Okay, so now that we know what verbs are, now we can go into tense. When doing tense, no matter what type of tense, you always have 3, past, present, and future. Okay, so past obviously tells us what happened before right now. Present shows us what is currently happening now. And then future tells us what is happening tomorrow, the day after, in a year's time. Anything that has not happened yet is future tense. Okay, so what we'll be doing today is we'll be doing simple past, simple present, and simple future tense. Okay, so if you have a look, let's start with present. This is when we talk about things that are happening right now. Now, simple tense tells us the thing that is currently happening, okay, or happened in that exact moment, or will be happening in that exact moment. So if we have a look, let's look at present. Let's talk about something that is currently happening now. So if I give you the sentence, let's say, Jane is talking. Okay, oh, not Jane is talking, Jane talks. Okay. Okay, so Jane talks to me. If we have a look at my verb is talks. It shows me the action that Jane is currently doing. Okay, so present tense, it's happening now. Jane talks to me. Okay, now if I want to change this to past tense, so it happened in the past. Simple past tense, you have to find your verb. This is the most important thing. First thing you do, you find your verb. My verb is talks. The only thing in your sentence that will change in simple tense is your verb talks. Okay, so if I now look, so word still stays the same, Jane. Now I can't say talks because that is present tense, it's happening now. Okay, I need to talk about what happened in the past. The majority of verbs, and I will talk about the exceptions just now, majority of verbs, when they get changed to the past tense, we add an ed on the end. So, Jane talked to me. Okay, so once again you can see the only thing that has changed is my verb. Okay, I added ed on the end and it's changed it to past tense. Okay, remembering this is all simple past, simple present, simple future. Okay, so same thing now when I want to look at future tense. If I want to change something to future tense, it's not that your verb will change. Your verb stays the same normal verb, but you have to add in a word. So now when I'm talking about future tense, I start my sentence the same because the rest of it stays. So I say Jane. Now, I'm not using talked because talked shows me past tense. I'm not using talks because that's showing me present, but I need the verb talk. But to show that it is going to happen in the future, I need to add in a word, and this word is will. So Jane will talk Okay, Jane will talk to me. This now shows future tense. It is going to be happening in the future. So it's not happening right now. It didn't happen in the past. It is going to happen in the future. So if you look, talk is still my verb, but I needed to add will in there. Okay, so let's look at another one and try this again with a different sentence. So, okay, so if I say, okay, new sentence. The cat jumps high. Now, if I need to change this to, let's jump to future tense first, okay? First thing you have to do if you get asked to change it is you need to find your verb. So what is my verb in the cat jumps high? My verb is jumps. It is showing me the action that is taking place. Okay, future tense, we remember we took away the S, but we had to add in a word. So instead of just saying the cat jumped high, we need to say the cat will jump high. Okay, so the cat will jump high is now my future tense. My simple future tense is showing me something that is going to happen in the future. Now, let's see if we can change it to past tense. Past tense, remember, usual verbs, normal verbs, we will get to exceptions now. You add an ed on the end. So I start with the cat because that stays the same. And then I say jumped high. Okay, so once again, when I changed it to past tense, I had to add the ed on the end. So the cat jumped high. Okay, this is how you change things in simple past, present, and future tense. Usually when teachers or set papers or ask questions with tense, they will usually give you a sentence and ask you to identify the tense. So they may give you a sentence like, the girl laughed loudly. And if I say laughed with the ed on the end, it shows me that it is past tense. So they will usually give you a sentence and then say identify the tense, and they will often ask you to change the tense. Okay, now there is something that I just want to point out here. We will talk about this more tomorrow, but you'll notice that I have not used a verb that has ing in it. So I have not said Jane is talking, or Jane was talking, or the cat was jumping. Okay, when you have an ing on your verb, it is continuous tense. So it's a different type of tense. And that is what we're going to be covering tomorrow. So if you see any ing in a verb, you know that it is continuous tense. So today you'll see that there's no ing on any of my verbs because we are doing simple tense. Okay, so let's now have a look at some irregular verbs. Okay, now you'll see that the verbs are used in those examples. When you change them to past tense, they get an ed on the end. These are regular verbs. These regular verbs follow the rule that if you change it to past tense, it gets an ed on the end, and that's that. Irregular verbs, the word changes. There's no ed in it, the word just changes. So let's have a look at one of these verbs. So if I say, okay, if I give you the sentence, Bob writes a letter. Okay, first thing to notice, what is my verb? My verb in this sentence is writes. Simple present tense, no ing, just the plain verb with an s on the end, writes. Okay, so I want to now change this to past tense. Okay? I do not say Bob writed. There is no DE in writes. It is an irregular verb. The word changes. So just like I did with the previous examples, the beginning of my sentence stays the same. So I say Bob, but now I need to change it. Write changes to wrote. Okay, so the rest of my sentences stayed the same, but when I change write to past tense, the word changes and it becomes wrote. Okay, this is an example of an irregular verb. They all do this. They change in some way. They could be a simple thing like write changes to wrote. Sometimes they change, the whole word changes. It depends on it. Unfortunately, as with a lot of exceptions in English, you just have to learn them. You'll often hear that it sounds funny, and it's like I've said before in previous episodes, where if it sounds funny, it's usually wrong. Your ears are used to hearing English, especially even if it's not your first language, you hear it all the time. So you will hear a word like righted and you'll go, no, that's not right. That's not correct. It sounds funny. It's usually wrong when it sounds wrong. You don't always have to understand why it sounds wrong, but you know that it sounds wrong. Okay, so let's go back to our example here. So we've got Bob wrote a letter. It's now our simple past tense. When you do future tense for an irregular verb, you use the present tense form. So you'll still say Bob because that's how we start our sentence. That doesn't change. Okay, now just like we did with the previous examples, you need to add the word will in. So you will say Bob will write. Remember, we leave our S off. A letter. Okay, so same thing as in the previous examples. The moment you go to future tense, you need to add will in there so that it changes to future tense. Okay, so let's look at another example of changing your tense with an irregular verb. So another irregular verb will be, let's think of it. Okay, my mom buys sweets. Okay, first thing to notice, what is my verb? My verb is buys. Okay, now buys is another irregular verb. You do not say buyed. Okay, the moment you say it, it sounds funny. You know that there is something wrong. So if we look at it again, now we need to change it. Let's start with future tense this time. Future tense, easy peasy. I know that I'm going to take my S off, and I know that I have to add will into that sentence. So I say, my mom will, and then I use this form of my verb, the present tense form of my verb, and I say will buy sweets. So future tense form, I've got will buy. Okay, I've taken my S off and I have just used the present tense form of the verb, but I have added will in. So now let's look at our past tense. Past tense, once again, buy is an irregular verb, so it changes completely when you change it to past tense. So if I say, start the sentence like I usually would, my mom, okay, now unlike writes, buy doesn't just change a little bit, the whole word basically changes. The only letters that are still there are the B and the U. So I change it to my mom bought sweets. Okay, bought is my past tense of buy. I buy something today, I bought it yesterday. Okay, so these are how irregular verbs work. The easy part will always be the future tense, because all you're doing in simple tense is you are adding will in there. The moment you go to past tense is when you need to remember you're either adding ed on the end of your verb, or if it's an irregular verb, it changes completely. Okay, some other examples of irregular verbs are words like run, I run today, you ran yesterday. Drive and drove, which is really similar to write and wrote, which we spoke about earlier. Write, wrote. Words like think and thought. Okay? Once again, unfortunately, these irregular verbs that are the exception to the rule, you have to learn them. There are quite a lot more. I'm not going to write them all down now, but you have to just learn them. And you may make a mistake the first time you change it. You just need to remember that, unfortunately, these are one of the things English do. They love exceptions to the rule. There are lots for verb tenses. Okay, now, what English teachers usually do in a test, okay, is they like to, I explained earlier, they like to give you a sentence, tell you to identify it, and then change it, okay? So, if I give you the sentence, okay, so you've been given the sentence, the dog chased the cat. Okay, the first thing your teacher will ask you to do is to identify the tense of that sentence. So the only way to figure out what the tense is to go, okay, what is my verb? My verb in this sentence is my doing word. It's what action is happening. It is chased. So as soon as I find my verb, I can go, okay, is it the normal form of the verb? Does it have an ed on the end? If it has an ed on the end, we know that it is past. So just by looking at my verb now, I know that this is past tense. Okay? And not only is it past tense, we can tell from the verb with the ed on the end that it is, and I should put this first, okay, it is simple past tense. Okay, now, this is really important to notice because it happens often when I mark tests or when I'm teaching tense. Because we have different types of tense, like simple tense, continuous tense, and perfect tense, okay, you need to make sure that you are sticking to the correct tense. Often in a test, the teacher will then say, now change this to present tense. They won't say simple present tense or continuous present tense. They'll just say present tense. They expect you to know that you should stick to the tense that it is already in. So if it's in simple tense, you must keep it in simple tense. Don't change it to continuous. So the dog chased the cat shouldn't change to the dog is chasing the cat. You've now changed it from simple tense to continuous tense, and your teachers will generally mark it wrong. Okay, they want you to stick to the tense that you have been given. So if they gave it to you in simple tense, you need to keep it in simple tense. If they tell you to change it to continuous tense, that's different. But as a general rule, you stick to the tense that you've been given. So it's in simple tense. So now if I change it to present, I need to change it to simple present tense. So I have to say, the beginning stays the same. The dog, okay? Now, usually in simple present tense, my verb gets an S on the end. So I don't say chased, I say chases. Okay? So, I have now changed it to simple present tense. Okay. If they ask for simple present tense, if they ask for simple tense, you need to keep it in simple tense, just like we have done here. Okay, like I said, I'll explain tomorrow about continuous tense with the ing, but simple tense, your verbs usually got the ed, and it changes when you change it from past to present to future. Okay, so let's look at another one. Just drawing some experience from reality because my cats are destroying my house by running around the kitchen. Okay, so the cats will run around. Now, first things first, your teacher says, what tense is it in? Okay, your first indicator should be that there is will in that sentence. So if there is a will in that sentence and then my verb afterwards, you should automatically know from seeing will there that this is future tense. But not just is it future tense, it is simple future tense. Okay, remembering what I explained earlier about if it is in simple tense, you should keep it in simple tense. Okay, it should not change. So you've now identified it is simple future tense, and now your teacher goes, okay, great, you now know what tense it is in. Change it to past tense. Okay, now earlier what I did is I gave you present and then we jumped from present into past or to future. Now we're jumping straight from future into past tense. So, like I explained, in simple tense, first part of my sentence will stay the same. So, the cats. Okay, now I get to my verb. Now you'll see that will run was part of my verb. So will shows you its future tense. You do not use will in past or present tense, so we know that we take out the will. Now we can't just say the cats run around, because if I say the cats run around, it is now in present tense. Okay? So I know that I now have to change run to ran. Remembering run is an irregular verb. So the cats ran around. Okay. The cats ran around. I have now, here is my verb ran, and I have now changed it to simple past tense. Okay, so just to recap what we have gone through so far. When you're using simple past, present, or future tense, okay, no ing on your verb. Your verb stays at its basic form. For your regular verbs, when you change them to past tense, they get an ed. So jump becomes jumped. If you change it to future, it's will jump. Irregular verbs, they change in future tense, and in present tense you use the base form of the verb. So for example, run. The moment you change it to past tense, it doesn't get an ed. You change the word, letters in the word. So run becomes ran. Think becomes thought. Drive becomes drove. Okay, that is what we have gone through so far. One last thing to go through now, and this, I'm going to point it out now because you do need to notice this when you're doing simple tense, but it is actually a whole nother lesson on subject-verb agreements, which we will at some point do a lesson on. You'll notice that when I did sentences, sometimes my verb got an S and sometimes it didn't. Okay? When you have, so if I say the cats singular, there's only one cat. If I say the cat jumps. Okay, singular cat, my verb gets an S. Okay, if I'm talking about more than one, if I say the cats, plural, more than one, I say jump. Okay, I'm just pointing this out so that you notice it and you pay attention to it, but I will in the future do a whole lesson on subject-verb agreement, which is what this is. So let's recap again over simple tense. Simple tense, you have your plain verb, okay? If you have a normal verb like jump, when you change it to past, it becomes jumped with an ed on the end. Okay, if you change it to future, you put a will in front and it becomes will jump. Regular verbs always get the ed. Irregular verbs like run becomes ran. Think becomes thoughts. Buy becomes bought. Write becomes wrote. Once again, you need to just pay attention to those irregular verbs. There's no rule which explains how they will change. You have to just, unfortunately, learn it. This is like when we did degrees of comparison. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where there's exceptions and you just have to know them. Remember to always trust your brain. When your brain goes, it sounds funny, go, okay, wait a minute, stop. Okay? The point of teaching you English is so that you learn how to communicate properly. You don't always need to know the fancy term for what is going wrong, but if you can stop yourself and go, wait a minute, that sounds funny, it's not right. Even if you can't explain in great detail the technical terms, you know that it's wrong, and that's the first thing that you need to remember. You're at least picking up where it's sounding funny. So, I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. I hope that you join us again tomorrow when we go over continuous tense. Please stay safe. Please share this video and subscribe and leave comments so that I know if there's anything you want me to go over, if there's anything you didn't understand. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow.